Hi everyone. I hope you guys can hear me. Right. So I'm sure you're like curious about what this number is. So let me just break it to you immediately. What if I tell you that this is the number of applications published monthly across App Store, Play Store, including like web applications? Now, what if I also tell you that when you are building a product, this is the number of applications you will be competing with to stand out? You might not be competing with these applications directly, but I'm sure you'll be competing with the ones in the same domain and also compared to the ones used by the same user group. It's like how we wish every instant messaging platform was like WhatsApp. That's what we're talking about. Now, to build a product that is successful, that can stand out and compete in the market, it is important to have a very, very strong strategy. And today we will go through an approach that we look at to solve customer problem and create business value. Building with strategy and design. So at Rootcode over the years, we have built multiple products, from internal innovation products to products for our clients and other external stakeholders. We have looked at multiple approaches and strategies, and one approach that has been successful for us always is to bring the product and the design strategy together. Now, why do I say product and design strategy? Because it always goes hand in hand in the approach that we have looked at. One of the popular product development approaches is to build MVPs. I'm sure all of you all know what a minimum viable product is. It's a product with just enough features to attract early adopters and validate your ideas with actual real life users. And today we will see how we bring in the product and the design strategy to build MVPs. Now, we are not here to tell you that this is the only approach that you need to follow, but this might help you get started on your product development journey, and we want to share the insights that we have gained over the years. Now, like I mentioned, there's two parts to this: the product strategy and the design strategy. First off, let's get into the details of the product strategy. Now, I will of course tell you what we do with the product strategy, but I'll also tell you why we do it so that you can apply that to the product you guys are building. So our product strategy here at Rootcode is built on three key pillars. Starting off with our very first pillar, product goal and user needs. So what do? We define our product's objective and ensure that it aligns with our users' needs. Now, what I mean here is that we identify the user's pain point and make sure we build something that actually solves a problem. Now, why do we do this? Now, imagine you build an application or a product that actually does not solve a problem. The chances that any user will actually use your application is actually very, very less. Instead, if you focus on identifying the pain point and understanding the fundamental challenge, you actually produce something that matters to an audience. A user will actually value using your application. Now, let's look at a famous example. I'm sure you all know Airbnb. Before Airbnb launched, there was one major problem. Travelers couldn't find affordable accommodation. Of course, there were fancy hotels, which is very, very expensive, but they couldn't find anything affordable. Now, Airbnb saw this market gap and they created a platform that solved this issue by bringing in homeowners who had extra spaces and bridging that gap using their application. Now, travelers found affordable accommodation and of course, homeowners earned a bit of extra income. Now, if you look at this example, Airbnb actually solved a real problem. How many of you all here use Airbnb? I'm sure many of us do, right? Moving on to our second key pillar, market research. After we define our product's objective, it is also very, very important to analyze what the market is. And we do this using 3 important steps. We identify our key stakeholders. So people who directly have an impact on the product. It could be your customer, it could be your client, it could be, other businesses and so on. Secondly, we define our target market. So what we do here is we understand the demographics. We understand user behavior, their preferences, and make something to fit the market need. And the third and the most important point, competitor analysis and value proposition. Now, you really need to understand what's around in the market. And you also need to make sure you position your product strongly. And I'll tell you why we do this. Now, when you don't conduct a market research, you risk doing 2 things. 1, creating something that already exists. And 2, creating something that is not needed in the market at that specific point, which does not have a market need. And of course, with both of these problems, you end up creating an application or a product that is not necessary at that point or does not have a market value. Now, let's look at another very, very popular example. Now, when Duolingo launched, Duolingo was not the only language learning application. There were so many applications that existed, but there were key problems that Duolingo identified before they launched. Now, the problems that Duolingo identified with other language learning applications was that these applications were very expensive, and also they followed a very traditional styled learning, a textbook style learning methodology. Now, Duolingo identified that specific market gap, and they came up with a solution that solved exactly that problem. They offered a freemium model. They offered bite-sized learning where it was much more interactive for any of us to learn. It was very intuitive because they also brought in a very reward, mechanism where we wanted to unlock levels to, get into the next part of the application. Now, what Duolingo did right was they analyzed the market. They exactly understood what the problem was, and they launched the application. And this has been a very, very successful application. And if I'm not wrong, it has about 116 million active, users. Just for your reference, that's about 6 times the population of Sri Lanka. That's how many users Duolingo has. Moving on to our third key pillar, roadmap. So this is our execution plan. We define key milestones, we define timelines, we define important features. And now, why do we do it? Imagine product development which is not structured. It will be very, very chaotic. If you don't know how your product should be in 3 months or 6 months, you won't have a bigger picture of this product, and you will introduce any features you want on the go, which will not maximize the value of the product you are building. I'm sure all of you all use Instagram, a very, very popular application. Now, when Instagram launched, if you look at the first screen there, that's just a photo sharing application. I'm sure you all remember in the 2010s. It was, you take a picture, you add a filter, you share with your, friends. Now, fast forward to now, Instagram has reels, stories, you can add music to your stories and posts. Now, imagine if back then they would have introduced all of these features together. How overwhelmed would we have been to try using this? Instagram focused on their core feature first, and then they went on to introduce their other features. Now, don't we all get excited to see new features when Instagram launches? We are very excited to see what they do, and when they have, launched something in another region, we wait until what is being launched to us. So that's how Instagram maximized their value. Now, we've looked at one part of what we have discussed, the product strategy. And here at Rootcode, we bring in the design strategy to work with the product strategy. And Amanda will take you through how we do that.
the design strategy. So what's a design strategy? Design strategy is basically how we can plan and think through our design process. So let's take a look at the design strategy we follow at Rootcode. So the design strategy that we have follow at Rootcode starts with getting informed from the product strategy. So how do we get informed from the product strategy as a design team when we are working at Rootcode is we would have when a product kickoff started, we would have like series of brainstorming sessions. Sometimes we would have like series of documentation. Depending on the project or the product we are working on, it will vary. So that's how we get the necessary information that we need from the product strategy. And what kind of information we do get through the product strategy. So when it's come to a product, we would get information about the product goals. And we would also get information about what are the primary level of user needs. And we would get the information about who are the key stakeholders involved in internally and also externally. And we also get the information about what is our target market. So as a UX designer, we can do our necessary relevant researches. And we also get the information about the results from the competitive analysis, the business analysts and the project managements would do. And those are the sets of the information that we would receive from the product strategy. And so when it's come to this information, some of these informations are product relevant, some of these information are business relevant information. So as a UX designer, you might be wondering, okay, why as a designer we need to receive this information. So I will give you a couple of scenarios. You would understand why as a UX designer we need this information and how we can utilize this information into better design decision making, as in better UX decisions. So let's take the scenario. So we are designing products right here. So product always has its business owners. So the business owners have their own business goals and the product goals. And also product has the end users, the final users, the actual users, they also have their user need. A success of a product always relies on finding the perfect balance between the business goals and between the user needs. Just because we are UX designers, that does not mean we can't compromise on the business goals and the revenue generation methods just to achieve or create a better UX for our end users. So knowing what are the business goals and also the user needs at the get-go from the start will benefit us in creating better balance between the user needs and also the business goals in our product, which will increase the value of the product. Well, let's take another thing, the roadmap. So as a designer, you would be working on the current version of the feature or maybe the product, current version of it. But knowing how the product's going to look like, how the product's going to turn out in maybe a couple of sprints, maybe a couple of months, maybe down years, would benefit you in creating the product in a way, like designing in a way that is open for changes, keeping it in a way where it would have the consistency throughout. Then again, it's creating a better UX for the overall product. Knowing the future roadmap, how it can benefit you. Let's take another thing, the competitive analysis, the results of the competitive analysis. Knowing about the competitors who are the similar products is important to us as a UX designer, and knowing about the competitors would not harm us as designers knowing that. So one thing we can do is we can take a look at who are our competitors. When we are making our design decisions, try to identify what are the UX gaps that they are making and try to think of ways how we can solve them so our product would have a competitively advantaged better UX throughout the whole scenario. So that way we can build a product that has increased value overall, then again catering towards business goals. Then again we would be also improving the user experience, catering towards the user needs. Perfect balance between the business goals and the user needs. That's a couple of ways you can use the information you are receiving from the product strategy for better design decision making. The next stage of our design strategy at Rootcode, what we do is the second stage is to try to understand the user. This is also the stage where we have gotten necessary set of information from the product strategy. And getting information from the product strategy is an iterative process. It does not happen at the first phase and ends. It's an iterative process where we will be keep getting informed throughout their researches. So we have received certain set of information from the product strategy. Now we can, at this stage, we can try to understand our users empathetically. This is also the stage where we would define, where we would like discover multiple problems that we need to solve. So we can't, as a designer, UX designer, we can't solve all the problems, and we should be only solving the problems that has a value to the end user. So this is the stage where we would discover certain set of problems and also sit down and have user interviews to figure out what kind of problems that actually resonates with the users and we can solve. So this is also the stage where we would discover and define what to actually design in our product as a overall. So basically the stage where we are identifying what are the things right to design, what are the right things to design. And also this is a stage at Rootcode. What we do to understand users, certain UX practices, what we would do is to identify, understand our stakeholders in a better level. We would create user personas to resonate with our end users in a greater level, and to identify the actual pain points and their goals and their expectations. We'd also start working on the empathy mapping. So those are kind of UX practices we would do in this stage in our design strategy. And next stage of our design strategy is where we start actually wireframing. We usually start off with paper prototyping, so we can start off with the paper prototyping. You guys also can. And this is also the stage where we have already defined what to design, and this is the stage where we are identifying how to design the things in a certain way, the right way. I will tell you one tiny example, so you would understand how to identify what to design and how to design the things in the right way. So a while back this is a tiny example. So a while back we were working on a certain product. When we were working on the certain product, the business owners, the product owners gave us a feedback that they wanted to improve the number of users in the application. They wanted to improve the numbers of users. And they also wanted to improve the number of users who are returning to the application. And we were able to identify one of the reasons people were not returning the application was the extensive login process. That was one of reasons. So the login process was quite a traditional login process where you would add the email, password and the OTP, multiple steps. Users felt overwhelmed. They didn't want to return to the application as much as they do. And we have taken a look at the competitors, and we also realized our competitors also have the single sign-on as a login method. And that was also a point that would add value to our product, and we made the design decisions. So we would add single sign-on to our application also. So that was our design decision. To how to design it in the right way, what we did was, so there were users who were still using the traditional sign-on method. So we decided to keep that as it is, and as another login method, we were planning to introduce the single sign-on. And another design decision what we made was, because we wanted users to use the single sign-on, the upcoming users, we made that as the primary login method. So users are by default prompt to use that as their main login method, which are newcoming users. So that was a couple of design decisions we made to design the things in the right way. That's a small example on that. And the fourth stage of the design strategy of ours is to validate through the design. So this is a scenario where we are doing MVP creation. So validating through a prototype. Even though I mentioned as validation as the last stage, validation always comes in early on also. So you have to validate throughout your design strategy, even from the beginning, even at the stage where you are identifying the problem, you have to validate your problem. That's an iterative process, a validation. So this is how we validate through a prototype. So here we are in the session here today, we are focusing on MVP creation, right? So MVP, one of the reasons we do MVP is to reduce cost and have the time efficiency. That's one couple of reasons why we do MVP. So when it comes to the last stages of the design process in the real world at Rootcode, we would have like Figma prototypes in hand. What we do is we send the prototype to our end users, actual end users, and also the, our business owners, the customers, and we get the earliest user feedback as possible before any developments are done. So one thing we can achieve, one of the couple of the advantages we can achieve from getting the early user feedback is that, and you might be also wondering why we should validate. The advantage is what we can get through validating through a design. To point out, one thing is we can check earliest as possible before any development whether the product is aligning with the user needs and the business goals. That's a one key advantage. Another advantage is we can actually validate because we have a working prototype as in a design prototype. We can validate whether the product actually fit to the market as in, does the problems that we are solving are worth solving, and does the solutions that we are providing for the users, do they actually resonate with them? We can check for the market fit of that product early on possible before any development costs have been done. Another thing we can do with the validating with design is that we can prioritize which features to build first. We can get the users' feedbacks. We can find what features users feel like they want to solve their problems, and we can use that as our prioritization for the timelines. And then also we can try to identify what are the non-functional features so we can omit them and bring in the necessary changes we want down the road. Those are a couple of advantages you would get if you are validating to a design earliest as possible in the MVP development environment. Okay, so we have taken a look at our design strategy, how we do our design strategy at Rootcode. And I will tell you one interesting story about how an application made their design strategy into action. So how one single application was to generate billions of revenue throughout a one small single design decision. You know the YouTube skip ad button, right? Yeah, you know that. So how many of you watch a advertisement from start to the end in the YouTube, unless you have a premium? Nobody really watches. So how many of you skip the ad after the initial 5 seconds? The majority of the people tend to skip. So let me tell you the story, the birth of the skip button, the birth of the true beat. So back in early days, the YouTube actually wanted to generate some revenue, generate some money through the advertisements. So they have added the advertisements before the videos. What happened after that was users were very not really happy watching the advertisements from start to the end. Users felt like they have been forced to watch advertisements. That does not mean anything to them. And so because of that, users hopped back and before they even start watching the video itself. What happened was users felt very unhappy, and the advertisers also were unhappy because nobody was watching the advertisements fully, which they have spent the money on. So that was a loss for them. So both user groups were unhappy. The advertisers were also unhappy. The viewers were also unhappy. Every user group was feeling like their wishes and needs have been not heard. So YouTube made this tiny decision, tiny but a bold and risky decision to introduce a skip button after the initial 5 seconds. So what happened from that? By introducing the skip ad button, the thing was users were able to have the control throughout their decision, as in whether they want to watch the ad or not. Users felt like they have been respected, their needs have been heard, their needs have been respected, and because of that, users actually stayed throughout some of advertisements. And also the advertisers were focused on creating like the initial 5 seconds hook. So the users would stay throughout the advertisement. So their advertising strategy also changed. And another thing YouTube did was they only charged the advertisers if the users choose to watch the advertisement from start to end. They were only charged if the users watched the advertisement to the full. So both users were happy, the viewers were happy, the advertisers were happy because of users were given the full control of their decisions, and because users felt like their needs have been heard. That's one of the examples that would tell us how much it is mean to listen to the user's actual needs and how we can generate lot of value to our own products. So the YouTube was able to generate billions of revenue throughout that. So that's how much it is important to listen to your users' needs. And that's one small story. We have a couple of stories from Rootcode itself that some of the products we were able to successfully deliver with the strategy of combining the product strategy and the design strategy. So I would take you through one product, Clamigo. One interesting thing about this application is we were able to deliver a product with a product solution, AI solution, and a hardware solution, all three in one. So that's one interesting thing about that. To give you a subtle brief on what kind of application this is an application will be used by farmers. Those are the user group. And this is an application where the farmers will be getting reports on their cultivation, how to improve them, and what are the potential risks and alerts. That's overall about what kind of application this is. So let's take a look at what our product strategy was, the key points of our product strategy. So at the start, when we were launching this product, as in kickstarting this product, we got a set of problems to be solved. So that was the one for the initial step of the product strategy. We got a set of problems to be solved. From that, we picked one problem that we felt like actually users need a solution for. So that problem was the climate changes effects on the cultivation of the crops. So we picked out the one problem and then we went to the users. So we had this something called co-creation sessions. Basically that session is our AI team was the people who were acting as a product team here. So our team would be there, actual end users would be also there. That's a virtual environment. We would have a discussion about what are the problems that they have and basically initial level of discussions. So for there, we went there. Then we validated and asked the users, do you believe the climate changes actually affects your cultivation? And they say yes. That's where we validated our problem. And then we asked them, do you really think, do you need a solution for that? Do you need a solution to mitigate the risk that is happening from the climate change? And they have answered, yes, we need a solution for that. So at the initial stage itself, we validated the problem is actually worth solving. We picked a certain problem out of a list of problems, and from the picked problem, we also validated whether the problem is actually worth solving. So that was the initial start of the product strategy. And then, so the product has been started. So initially we were going to start off with playing around with the climate data. And then we realized the product has its greater potential. We can add some additional things to increase the market value. One of the couple of things we decided to add was we decided to add the image processing. So the farmers would be taking a picture of the plantation and we would be giving the certain set of freebies. And also we decided to add the hardware device, the soil sensor. The farmers will be getting the information from the soil conditions to improve their cultivations. So we evolved the product from the initial ground to fit to the market. So that was two key pointers about our product strategy. Let's move into the design strategy, how we approach that. And I have said we had co-creation sessions. So from the initial start itself, We send our designs to paper prototypes to wireframes, final prototypes into the co-creation sessions where the actual farmers review that and given us the feedbacks. So the key point of our design strategy was to have an iterative testing cycle with the actual end users. So after that, we have created the MVP and our team went to the actual farming places. So the farming places were actually situated in Portugal. So they have tested the product in the actual farming grounds in the actual condition. And then we were able to find out a couple of UX gaps. We need the localization of the applications. Most of the farmers were not very fluent in English, so we needed the localization. Even after the delivery, we were addressing the UX issues to increase the value of the product. So that's one important thing. Even after the delivery, you need to keep up on the testing cycle. And another thing we were able to find out was, so the farming conditions are not very comfortable. Some of these UI components need to be a little bit improved to increase the accessibility. So we also addressed those. And another thing we realized was, this is a behavioral thing. The farmers are not very tech-oriented people. They don't use their mobile phones all the time. So we need these applications to keep the farmers be alerted about the plant's condition. So we needed to create a notification system so the farmers are alerted every day that they need to use the application to keep monitoring their cultivation. So we were able to identify a couple of UX gaps there also. So the key takeaways from this product is we learned about the importance of validation and the problem at the earlier stage. That's one key takeaway. Another key takeaway is that we can always start from somewhere and evolve the product to fit to the market, so the product's value would increase. Another thing for the design strategy is that we have to keep testing until we go to a level of the perfection. Okay, we can't always achieve the perfection, but to a certain level. So that's the one story. We have a couple of other success stories, successfully delivered applications. So Kirthika will take you through those.
Right, so we've looked at Lamigo, one of our products, and I'm going to speak about another one of our products called Beanstalks. So to give you a quick brief on what Beanstalks is, it's a personalized budget assistant. Let me take you through the whole life cycle of how this product came into existence. So this was a client requirement, and initially we spent time understanding the domain to understand what already existed and to understand a specific domain. So what usually happens is we have back and forth discussions with all our stakeholders, including the client team, to define our product strategy. So this is identifying the market, analyzing the market, identifying what exists in the market and what's missing, and identifying what exactly is not working so that we can develop something that is not already there in the market. So when we were conducting our market analysis, we thought we found our product strategy. So the problem was users were overwhelmed with how budgeting applications were used. It was a long list of steps to fill in intense amount of information about yourself to create a simple budget plan. So we thought we had a product strategy straight to build a simple, intuitive experience for our user. Right? And based on that, our design strategy was simple to create a very simplified user experience for our user. One thing that we always do when we are building products is to make sure we validate our designs and prototype with focus groups. So with Beanstalks, we actually validated our prototype with at least 15 different focus groups. And when we thought we had our product strategy fitting the best there, with the feedback that we received from our user groups, we realized, no, that was not the case. What we decided was we will go with a traditional approach, a usual form and, getting details, but a very simplified approach, right? But what the response we got from the user groups were, okay, this is just another application. It just simplifies, but there is nothing extraordinary in this application, right? And we changed our whole approach to the budgeting application. What started off as a simple form turned out to be a chat assistant And the feedback that we received from our user groups after we updated our designs was, oh great, this sounds like I'm talking to a friend about my budget. I feed in my expenses and I get a great budget. It's like talking to a colleague and giving out details and I get the response I want. Now, the key thing to note here is that we took the feedback that we received and we validated it and provided our users with different ideas even before we started development. So before we went into the development phase, we stopped from the product failing. And that's exactly why the product and the design strategy plays a big part. Now imagine we would have developed this without any validation and testing, and we would have, pushed it to the market. With the feedback that we received during our prototype phase, obviously, this is just going to be another application. But we were successful in stopping that development because we identified what the feedback we received from these user groups were. So our key takeaway with this product is to understand and validate the feedback that we receive and always provide new approaches and strategies to our clients. Now, let's look at another case study or a product that we worked. Now, this is our very own product. Let me give you a backstory to this before talking about SCAP. When we launched our MVP, this was a simple leave management system. It was called My Leave. And what started off as a leave management system, somewhere in between changed into a whole business workflow platform. And I'll tell you the story of that. So, how this product MVP came into existence was purely because of an internal problem that we had. We were struggling to find an application or a product that was very simplified for an employee to apply a leave or analyze the data of how leaves work. We researched, we looked for products that existed in the market, but nothing catered our solution. And that's when we decided, okay, let's build a product that solves our problem. And we did different types of research, from market analysis to identifying, what exactly exists in the market, and we developed our solution. Of course, this went through validations, prototyping, testing, and getting feedback from our internal team itself, because we had, 100 plus employees testing out this application, right? And we were successful in launching our MVP. Now, once we launched our MVP, our market research did not stop. And like I mentioned earlier, all these strategies that we talk about, product and design, is a continuous cycle. It does not stop. So once we launched our MVP, we were of course continuing our market research, and we identified a bigger market gap, that a simplified solution just did not exist for a leave management system, but for a whole business workflow platform. It was complex. Take ERP solutions, for instance. It takes a while to integrate these solutions. It takes a while to understand these solutions. But we wanted something very simple so that companies like us can use this application. And that's when we changed our roadmap to a business workflow platform from a simple leave management system. Now, if we wouldn't have gone back and analyzed our market, understood what the market needs, we wouldn't have even realized that this is what the market needs right now. And that is exactly why it is important to always go back and refine your product and your design strategy and align it with the current market needs. And if you all want to check out SCAP, please check out scap.com. You will see how our business workflow platform works. So these are a few examples of, the products that we have built here at Rootcode. Strategy and design are never done. I think, like I mentioned before, it's a continuous cycle. It's very important that you go back and redefine or look at your product and your design strategy frequently to analyze the current market and understand what exactly is needed. Secondly, early feedback is useless without action. Now, if we get feedback and we don't do anything about it, that doesn't solve our problem. I'm not saying we need to accept all the feedback that we receive, but it is important to validate the feedback that we receive and act right upon it. And thirdly, start small, scale with insight. Now, it doesn't matter if you launch with one feature or two. It doesn't matter if you launch with 10 or 15 features, but what matters is that you maximize the value with that one feature you put out to the market. Start small, you'll understand your market needs, you'll understand your users better, and then you can keep developing your product. These are the insights that we have gained over the years, and I hope these insights will help you guys build a successful product. Thank you.